Magical languages are a very common trope in fantasy. It certainly is an aesthetic. Saying something while casting a spell is a tradition at least as old as Shakespeare, but in Macbeth, correct me if I'm wrong, but the eye of newt and toe of frog part is not very rigorously defined. It's a soft magic system. It's reasonable to assume that were the words altered, the spell would still work, and perhaps the words could be omitted entirely. Even as recent as Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, at no point do any of the languages explicitly hold magical power, at least according to my friend. I haven't seen the movies or read any of the books beyond The Hobbit, so I may be wrong, but this suggests that an ancient magical language is a new innovation in fantasy. And sure enough, nowadays we have media like Harry Potter, where in order to cast a spell, you need to say a word in like Latin or something. In Skyrim, there is no distinction made between speaking Dovazul and casting specific spells by using the language. If you say the word fire, fire just kinda happens. In actually good fiction, like A Wizard of Earthsea, every location and every object has a true name in a language called Old Speech. Knowing this true name gives you control over it. People have true names too, and using their true names, you can control them. These names are absolute and unchanging. In Aragon, you need to speak in a language simply called Ancient Language, which years ago was indeed a vernacular, but now it holds magical power. And in some of the best fiction ever written, The Secrets of Druin by writer Tony Abbott, the magic language is just like random syllables that, if you're a wizard, can just sort of pop into your head. It's not very clear, but by book 17, the main character is casting some cool magic and saying some funny syllables. So there's our little tour of some examples of magical languages in fiction. Now I'm going to talk about why they don't make any sense and why I think that. But first we have to start at the beginning, in the 1960s. Charles Hockett defined what a language is using 16 features that we call Hockett's design features. These features, while flawed in a handful of ways, are a very good beginning step to describe and define human language, especially if we want to describe it as distinct from the communication systems of other animals. In the past, I've brought up productivity, but this time I'm going to talk about arbitrariness. Arbitrariness is the concept that the units of language, however they may be organized, be they words or sentences or phrases, are arbitrary. For example, nothing about the sounds k, a, and t mean cat. The meaning associated with the word is completely unrelated to the sounds that compose it. Unfortunately for Hockett, it's really easy to give counterexamples. Sorry, Hockett. Around the world, when shown these two shapes, people from all sorts of linguistic backgrounds agreed that this one is Kiki and this one is Booba. This one, that's spiky and sharp, is Booba, and this one, that's globular and round, is Kiki. Just kidding, other way around, but you felt in your soul that I was wrong. And it has something to do with the sonority hierarchy, but that's too far in the weeds for this video. Pause here if you want to learn more. So the words for things in languages are sometimes influenced by these inherent properties of the sounds people use. This is related to the concept of an onomatopoeia, where some words in languages are based off of the sounds that the things they describe make. Like ding actually sounds more similar to the sound a bell makes than blorge. So we don't say blorge bloig when the doorbell rings, we say ding dong. Similar stuff happens in other languages. Here are some examples from languages that I speak. And finally, sign languages. At the time Hockett made his design features, he made them for spoken languages, and some of the early versions show this pretty plainly, but they've been updated to describe sign languages as genuine examples of human language. Even so, a super high number of signs in just about every sign language physically resemble the things they represent. Linguists that study sign languages call these signs iconic, and my collaborator for this section of the video felt it important to teach this terminology. Here are some silly examples of iconic signs going across the screen right now. So there's the evidence that language isn't arbitrary. Except I tricked you. None of that invalidates the design feature. Kiki and Booba, still arbitrary. Onomatopoeia, still arbitrary. All of these iconic signs that resemble their meanings, still arbitrary. Look at the sign for cat in American Sign Language versus British Sign Language. ASL is on the left and BSL is on the right. Note how, though they both physically call to mind the whiskers of a cat, they use different hand shapes, and the one in BSL uses both hands, where the one in ASL only uses one. And these signs evolve over time. In ASL, using two hands can feel dramatic, according to Dr. William Vigers. Vigers. And connotations like this are a telltale sign of language evolution. If these signs were not arbitrary, they would be the same in both languages. Even though they're both iconic, the way in which they're iconic is arbitrary. In língua gestural portuguesa, the sign for gato, which means cat, is based on stroking the fur of a cat, so it doesn't even use the same core icon. It's still iconic, but it is arbitrary. I'd also really like to thank Jan Olivia for helping me polish this section of the script. I am not in the know about sign languages, so were it not for her help, this video would have been much lower quality. So, even if a word in a language has aspects that resemble their meaning, just the fact that different languages have different words for almost everything is enough to demonstrate that arbitrariness is a constant in human language. So this is the first problem with most magical languages. They're not arbitrary. Apparently. Okay, let me explain what I mean. In Skyrim, there are specific sounds that objectively and observably mean the things they represent. You can see it. I'm breathing fire here because I said the word for fire. In Skyrim, this word is being presented as unarbitrary because it is the one word in the entire world that truly means fire. This is linguistically really, really weird. You're telling me that the syllable yol in the Skyrim universe, Tamriel, is objective and not arbitrary? But the word for fire in every other language, be it Falmer or Dwemer or English, I think? Okay, apparently it's called Tamrielic. I don't know, the Elder Scrolls universe is a whole other linguistic mess. Let me know if you want me to make a video about that. But all these languages are arbitrary? Why does only one of these languages lack arbitrariness? This isn't completely immersion breaking. This can work. Most people probably don't care, but I care so much. For me, this is really weird. There's a book I love that gives a wonderful explanation for its magical language. It's called The Witch Boy, and I bought it back when it first came out. It's about gender nonconformity within a fictional set of gender roles. It explores incredibly relevant concepts through an entirely constructed lens, and has a lot to say about coming out and going against the status quo. At the same time, it weaves a wonderful world and magic system that pours envy into my mouth in very fashion. It's the kind of story you want to live in. It's so great. Go buy it. Go buy all 3 of them. Check them out at your local library. Links below. In The Witch Boy, there are witches, and they can cast spells using runes. Sometimes these runes are written on surfaces, sometimes they appear in the air like glowing light, and sometimes they're shown inside the speech bubbles. The reader is never told how they're pronounced, which I think is really cool. The glyphs are really cute too. While teaching how to cast spells in the opening scene of the first book, one witch says that the plants themselves prefer specific names. The apple prefers to be called this awesome shape. The grapes prefer to be called this one. There may be some sort of syntax going on too, but it's not expanded upon much, except for like this one landscape in the 3rd book. It doesn't need to be expanded on though. The main thing here is in book 2, where the origin of this language is revealed by the cool, gender non-conforming grandmother. She calls it a very old collaboration between witches and friendly spirits. It's actually left ambiguous whether or not this language is consistent all around the world or not, but this explanation sufficiently justifies how the language has power behind it while still being arbitrary. This is really cool. So rarely is something like this made clear in a work of fiction, and it really adds to the immersion. This is a magical language done right in every possible way. Alright, fiction is in many ways a reflection of reality, so let's take a look at real-world concepts of some sort of magical language. In many traditions, the language of practice and ritual is a classical language. In much of South Asia, Sanskrit. In China, classical Chinese. In the Yucatan Peninsula, classical Maya. In Europe, Hebrew, Latin, Ancient Greek, Old Church Slavonic, Medieval Galician. There are actually a lot of these in Europe specifically, but in the Middle East and North Africa, classical Arabic. In Ethiopia, Ge'ez, called Ethiopic in some academic contexts. Whatever the language is, it's not a vernacular anymore, and it seems that there are usually texts of great religious or spiritual significance originally written in that language, or, in the case of Ge'ez, the only complete version of a text. These languages are used frequently in ritual. In Western Europe, singing in Latin is really, really common. It's almost always about Jesus. Jews sing in Hebrew in very fashion, Muslims sing in Arabic, Taoists read poetry in classical Chinese and discuss the grammar and usage in great detail. I used to be really into witchcraft, and I still practice it from time to time, but I remember while I was early into research, some point around 9th grade, someone said in a video I was watching, don't write spells in Latin. Unless you speak Latin, your intent might be obscured. You see, in witchcraft, intent is key to a successful working. Symbolism can also be powerful, but most witches don't prioritize it over intent. The concept that people would ever write an incantation in a language they didn't understand had literally never crossed my mind up to that point, so I was surprised when I heard it being advised against. But the reason why people would want to use a language like Latin in a spell is because Latin is old and Latin has been used in a spiritual context for centuries. A lot of these people also come from Christian backgrounds, and in a lot of Christian backgrounds, Latin is the most common liturgical language. How can we apply this to fictional magic languages? Well, perhaps the symbolism of the language is what makes it effective. If you use a different language, it likely wouldn't work because it lacks that symbolism. Maybe there was a time thousands of years ago when that language was simply a vernacular, like an Aragon. What in real life is a feeling or an aesthetic could, in your fictional setting, carry real magical power that folks can observe scientifically. Likewise, maybe the symbolism doesn't matter much at all, and the intent is the only thing that matters. Maybe the intent is just a bit stronger, at least on average, when the person casting the spell is using a language that they believe to be magical. Okay, let's talk about specificity. In cognitive psychology, and also lexical semantics, there's the concept of different levels of characterization. I've linked to a really good video about it below made by an expert, but essentially, language has a lot of different words, and these words can be anywhere from as vague as thing to as specific as Lipamanka's slightly damaged copy of the Hakaranda Dictionary and Grammar of Melanesian Pidgin by F. Mahalik, SVD. There are words that fall all over the place in the middle. So in a magic language, if you cast a spell that makes an apple levitate, how specific does the word for apple need to be? Can it just be fruit? Does it have to be the true name of that specific apple? If so, how does one learn this true name? How specific are the words in the language? If you have a soft magic system, it's fine to write these questions off, but if you have a hard magic system, it can be really immersion breaking for me, and probably very few other people, if the bounds of what specific magical words are referring to are wishy-washy, Charlie Brown style. What comes after specificity? Grammar, or sometimes a lack of grammar. I'm a conlanger, and I have plenty of formal linguistics training. When I think language, I think about grammar and lexicon working together, but it's important to understand for me that when your average writer or world builder wants to include a magical language, they may not be thinking about grammar. There are plenty of people who think that other languages are just word-for-word translations of English. They're incorrect, but who says they need to be correct for the sake of their setting? Most of the readers won't be looking too deeply at the grammar of their magical language. So very often, these magical languages will lack any grammatical rules. When you hear people speaking them, the word order is usually just English. There may be a few changes here and there, and it's probably simplified a bit, but they're changes from English, not a grammar built from the ground up. This is fine. This is fine. I am being completely genuine when I say that a magical language does not need a unique grammar system, or even a grammar system at all, to be interesting for the sake of storytelling. It does need a good lexicon, though, and I'll stand by this. It's not hard to go above and beyond in this respect, because frankly the bar is set pretty low. Let's look at Skyrim's dragon language again, to see what I mean when I say the bar is set low. Can you tell I'm not a fan of Skyrim? I have like hundreds of hours in it though, but I turn on God mode the whole time, so like I'm not a real gamer. But anyway, each word in this language has a one-to-one translation with an English word. There are no words in this language that need further explanation. Yol means fire, and Parthenax will go on for a while telling you about how special and unique the word is, and how it really means power. But it doesn't. This other word that he tells you means power. But ultimately this is stuff that could be said about the English word. This isn't lexicography, it's just philosophy, and it doesn't cut it. In the real world, what one language has one word for, another will have two. It will require you to choose between them. Going over every example of this would take me a lifetime, so I have a few examples going across the screen right now, and you can pause the video to learn more. And this is just for my own knowledge. If you're bilingual, you'll be able to look between the two languages you know for your own examples. I really like learning about these, so drop them in the comments. If you're creating a language that has magical power, you have no reason not to use these quirks of lexicon to your advantage. If this magical language is tied to the way the universe works, what does it say if the word for a velvety texture also means quiet? Your magical language can say a lot about how the world works, especially about how the magic of the world works. And at the very least, don't steal your conceptual metaphors from English. If your magical language's word for road also means doctrine or course of life, your magical language is immediately less captivating. At the very least, get rid of these English overlaps and give everything its own word. And another thing, give your language two words for the same thing. Have them differ in very slight ways, and explore how this can impact the magic too. There's a lot to do here. Okay, finally, let's talk about how one can make sure users of a magical language aren't too overpowered. The simplest way to describe how a magical language works is, unfortunately, to make every sentence spoken in the language manifest in reality. This is too overpowered on its own. If your magical language is like any other language, you can just learn how to say insert name here dies, and boom, they die. Wait, I think I remember a book that did do that. Oh, I can't remember what it was. Probably wasn't a very good magic system then, and the person who wrote it is probably a terrible person. So what can we do to prevent our magical languages from being so overpowered? Perhaps it is not enough to simply know the syllables and what order to say them in. Perhaps the skill of pronouncing the words perfectly is crucial, lest the spell fail. In Earthsea, humans are unable to lie in old speech. Adding mental blocks surrounding the language can be a little weak in my opinion, but it can still work. Like Skyrim kinda does this. Once the Greybeards learn Dovazul, they can no longer speak out loud without affecting the world around them. Perhaps something like friendship or being true to yourself or having good ethics is required. Maybe there are additional spell components. Maybe there's a special adposition or grammatical case in your language for spell components. But that's tangential. The point is, you can totally be creative here and think of ways to limit the power of the people who use your fictional magical language. Alright, I hope this helped at least one person. Remember that the laws of the universe don't have to be the same as the ones in real life. So if you want to make your magical language unarbitrary, go for it. I think that's fine. It's kind of like having a quantum computer chip that doesn't need an industrial freezer. The only people who will notice that that doesn't make sense are quantum computer researchers. Me is who and who is he and he is she and dog is fish. Eat a good fish. Thanks again to Jan Olivia for collaborating on the section on sign languages. This is my biggest endeavor so far, and I hope you enjoyed. Some quick channel updates maybe or something. These videos take a lot of work. I've yet to set up a Patreon, but if you like what I do, you can throw me a tip on Ko-fi. I have yet to set up a Discord server. I'm waiting for a larger subscriber base because I don't want my Discord server to be dead on arrival, and I'm patient enough to not jump the gun on this one. But I do plan to set one up eventually. And my Q&A video, it's in the works. It's long, though. I'm still accepting questions, I guess. I have no idea when it will be out. Finally, I'm astounded by this, but according to my YouTube analytics, every single one of my viewers is subscribed. That's 100%. So there's no need for me to get all sad about most of my viewers not being subscribed. In fact, if I asked you to subscribe right now, that would be really counterproductive, because statistically, every single one of you is already subscribed. Thanks for watching. Bye!